Welcome back, and like I promised last week, this time it's about the records I bought in Rome when I was on holiday in Rome last week. Like I said, I bought a couple of records in two record shops. I bought one record in the record shop Groovy Music, that's like in the city center area of Rome, I would say. It's more focused on let's say black music, funk, hip hop, soul, but they also have some classic rock, prog rock and stuff like that. And I bought my all-time favorite Pink Floyd album, their first album, Five at the Gates of Dawn. I already have this on CD, but now I finally obtained it as a vinyl, as a mono vinyl record, and it sounds great. It's a repress, of course, and it sounds perfectly fine. And like I said, it's my favorite Pink Floyd album. My two favorite Pink Floyd albums are very unusual ones because I don't really like Pink Floyd. I like the Syd Barrett Pink Floyd, and basically that's the Syd Barrett Pink Floyd. After that, Syd, had to leave the group. My second favorite Pink Floyd album is also from the phase when they're still finding themselves after Sid left. It's Atom Heart Mother, an album that most Pink Floyd fans don't really rate. I'm not such a big fan of the bombastic Gilmore Waters era, metal, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, The Wall. I don't really care for those albums, but this, in my opinion, is a 60s psychedelic masterpiece. So finally I have it on vinyl. But most records, all records apart from this one, I bought in Radiation Records. They have 3 stores in Rome. I went to the one in the district Trastevere, and like I said in my previous video, this was one of the best first time in a record shop experiences of my life. I could have bought like 20 or 30 albums. In the end I went for, I don't know how many these are, maybe 10 or 8 to 10 or something, and spent just like 120 euros. So it was really also, it wasn't ultra cheap, ultra bargain, but for what I got, this was very, very fairly priced. It's really on the low end of pricing those records, and they all sound great, they're all in great condition. Some of them are like reissues or represses where it's not second hand, but some of them are second hand, but they're all almost mint. And first one I want to show is one I already have in various formats now. This is like my 4th copy of this album, but this is one of my, if you watched my video like a year ago, my top 10 favorite albums of all time. I think this was my number 5 or 6 favorite album of all time. A Tabua de Esmeralda by Jorge Ben from Brazil. It's from 1974. This is an all-time great album for me. So, I don't mind having several copies of it, because some of my vinyl copies don't really sound that good, but this is a very recent repress and therefore sounds fantastic. Then I bought 2 CDs also. I bought 2 CDs in this store. This is one of the very few David Bowie albums I didn't yet have in my collection. The Next Day, which was, the previous to last album he did. The last album he did, Black Star, of course, but this is the album before Black Star, I think from 2013. I was pleasantly surprised. This I have to say about all the albums I bought from Radiation Records. I listened to all them last couple of days, and I loved each and every one of those. So that's why I'm saying this was one of my best record buying experiences ever, because it doesn't usually happen that you buy like 10 albums and you end up loving all of them, even the ones you weren't yet familiar with. But this is also a great later day David Bowie album. Then an album I wanted to have for a very, very long time. I once or twice listened to it because a friend of mine played it once or twice to me. The debut of Frank Zappa, or as the band was called back then, the Mothers of Invention, his 60s kind of band, but this is his debut album. I don't really like Frank Zappa in general as an artist. I don't like the very jazzy experimental 70s stuff, and even less so the stuff after the 70s. But you know, those first couple of records in the late 60s, they are brilliant, and Freak Out, you know, this is one, in my opinion, this is one of the best debut albums of all time. That's how I remembered it when I, you know, listened to it back then, many years ago, when a friend played it to me. And, you know, I still feel that way after listening now to it. It's really, it's such a eclectic, fantastic, in a way also revolutionary, ahead of its time album. You know, it's from 1966, and it's a double album, one of the first pop double albums. And you know, it's like everything that would happen in the later 60s after that. You know, it's almost like a precursor to things like the White Album by the Beatles or something like that. It's really fantastic album with, you know, all those pastiches of different styles. After that, you know, Frank Zappa, you know, became a bit too weird for me, but this is also weird, but this is the right kind of weird for me. I really love Freak Out. Another album another album I was already familiar with but never really owned is Disraeli Gears by Cream, and I loved it. You know, also the great repress here. It's sounding brilliantly. Then one of the highlights was this Kate Bush bootleg. You know, the only thing I have from her tour of life, the only real tour she ever did in 1979, was the official release, which was an EP, you know, just 4 or 5 songs from that tour. This is a full concert from the tour, live at Hammersmith Odeon. Brilliant. I mean, the whole show is also for free on YouTube. You can watch it, you know, as a concert film on YouTube. But now to own it as an audio, as a vinyl is great, sounds great, and you know, I'm a huge Kate Bush fan. She's in my top 10 all-time favorite artists of all time, so great that I finally owned it. But an even better live album that I bought and that I hadn't heard before yet was Can, you know, the German krautrock band Can, live in Stuttgart 1975. Triple album, triple vinyl. This is really a fantastic album. It sounds really great, you know, the bass, the drums, it's really audiophile sounding, and also the artwork is very nice. It's really a great album artwork. Like I said, triple album on orange vinyl. You know, it looks good, it sounds good, it's really great. It's really, if you just listen to Freak Out by Mothers of Invention like I did, and then you put on this, really flows together nicely. It's really like a continuation of what Frank Zappa did with Freak Out. Of course, minus the sense of humor of Frank and the words. You know, this is mostly like instrumental proggy jams, but it's, you know, it's a great, also it's a kind of a Freak Out from 1975. Then another album I bought there was a pleasant surprise. This was in the cheap section of the record shop, of course second hand, and I think I paid like €5 or something. I think he gave it to me for free because I bought all those other records. The stylistics, heavy, great soul, R&B, very smooth act from the early mid-70s. I think this is from 1974. It's really what a band like the Stylistics, or maybe also the Delphonics and acts like that did, was they're at the transformation point of where 60s soul and R&B slowly morphed into disco, what would become disco. You know, this is almost sound. This is like a blueprint to something that 1 or 2 years later bands like Chic or the Bee Gees for the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, or Tavares, you know, would take this approach and morph it into what would become disco music. But it's still, you know, it's still more on the 60s soul side than disco, because it's really very organic sounding, and it's also kind of a schmaltzy album with lots of lush, smooth strings that I really like. And there's even a song which is called I'm not sure if I know which song this was, but there's a song on this album that's almost thematically like Silly Love Songs by Paul McCartney would be 2 years later, where they really are breaking the fourth wall. You know, in Silly Love Songs, Paul sang about, you know, that he's aware that he's writing silly love songs. There's a song on this album where they also sing about that they know that this is really maybe very schmaltzy music, but you know that there's also a point for this kind of music. So it's kind of self-aware, and it's a surprisingly great album by a singles band. You know, a band like the Stylistics were more like a singles band, but really as an album, this works. So lots of great records I bought in Rome. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.